This version is written specifically for your YouTube audience, ages 45, 65 plus, USA/Australia, with real-life tone, moral weight, and emotional depth. It feels authentic, story-driven, and packed with justice, respect, and a life lesson at the end, all without any headings. When I first moved back to the small town of Willow Creek, I never expected that a quiet piece of land I inherited would become the source of a community-wide standoff. I came here looking for peace, not a fight. But peace has a funny way of slipping through your fingers when entitlement moves in next door. My name's Jack Harrison. I'm 63 years old, a retired civil engineer, and a man who believes in fairness and minding your own business. After my wife passed, I sold our suburban home and came back to the land my father left me, a wide stretch of property bordered by a small river and a single bridge connecting to the new neighborhood that popped up over the last 15 years. That bridge my father built it himself. He designed it, funded it, and maintained it long before any of those modern homes even existed. It was our connection to town, and technically it still stood on our land. A small easement was drafted decades ago, allowing temporary passage. My father, being the kind soul he was, never made anyone pay for it. He always said, a road should connect people, not divide them. But not everyone thinks that way anymore. The trouble began one rainy morning when I heard a commotion down by the river. I grabbed my jacket and went down to check it out. To my shock, a group of men wearing safety vests and hard hats were tearing down my bridge. Huge pieces of wood and metal were being yanked out, crashing into the water like thunder. I shouted over the noise, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" A tall man with a clipboard turned around, smirking like he'd been expecting me. "You must be Mr. Harrison. We're taking this bridge down for safety reasons. HOA decision." HOA decision? I repeated, trying to process what I just heard. "This bridge is on my property. You can't just..." He cut me off, still smirking. "The Homeowners Association voted on it. It's unsafe. Liability issue. Don't worry, we're putting in a new one soon." I stared at him, rain dripping off my hat brim. Without asking the person who owns the land, he shrugged. "You can take it up with the HOA president." And that was my first run-in with them, the Willow Bend HOA, a self-appointed little government that seemed to think property lines didn't apply to them. I didn't even live in their neighborhood, but they sure acted like they had authority over me. By the time I managed to get down the paperwork from the county clerk, my bridge was gone. Completely. Just a scar of mud and splintered posts on both sides of the river. The only way in and out for that entire neighborhood was now a long, rough detour or swim. And when I read the HOA's public notice, it was full of lies. It said the bridge posed a threat to residents and had no identifiable owner. That last part made me laugh out loud, because I had the original deeds, the surveys, and even the old easement documents signed by my father and the previous county supervisor. They knew exactly who owned it. They just thought I was too old or too tired to fight back. 2 days later, a woman showed up at my doorstep. Mid-50s, fancy SUV, sharp haircut. Introduced herself as Linda Perry, president of the Willow Bend HOA. Her tone was that practiced, syrupy sweet kind that hides an edge. "Mr. Harrison," she said, "I understand there's been some confusion about the bridge." "Confusion?" I said, motioning her to the porch. "Your people destroyed private property." She smiled tightly. "Our residents were concerned about the structure. It was falling apart. We had no choice." "You had every choice," I replied. "You could have talked to me first. You knew it was mine." Her expression hardened. "Mr. Harrison, the bridge was used primarily by our community. It made sense for us to take action. We're planning to build a safer, more modern one, funded by the HOA. On my land." "Well," she hesitated. "The old easement. Expired in 1992. I said, "Your people have been using it out of kindness. My father's kindness. That doesn't give you ownership." Her eyes flickered for a moment. "I think you're misunderstanding, sir. If you make this difficult, you'll be cutting off access to over 50 families. That won't look good." That's when I realized what kind of person I was dealing with. Someone who thought moral pressure could replace legal rights. I simply nodded. Good to know, Linda. I'll handle it. Over the next few weeks, I filed a police report, then contacted the county engineering office. The officer who took my complaint, an old friend named Sheriff Davis, looked at the photos and shook his head. Jack, they don't have a leg to stand on. That bridge was your private property. They destroyed it. That's criminal damage. Still, I wasn't out for revenge. Not yet. I wanted to give them a chance to make it right. So, I sent a formal notice to the HOA, politely stating they had 7 days to meet with me and discuss restoring the bridge or compensating me for the damage. I figured we could work something out like reasonable adults. They never responded. Instead, I got a letter from their legal representative, some fresh-faced attorney from town, accusing me of obstructing community access. It was absurd. They had bulldozed my bridge, and now they were acting like I was the villain for not letting them rebuild on my land without permission. That letter was the last straw. So I called my old engineering firm, the one I'd helped run before retiring. We drew up plans, not for a new bridge, but for a gate, a strong steel gate across the access road leading to where the bridge used to be. I installed it with clear signage, private property, no trespassing, unauthorized access prohibited by law. Within 24 hours, my phone blew up, angry voicemails, threats, HOA board members shouting about being trapped. They had one other route out of their neighborhood, a winding dirt trail on the far side of the development that hadn't been maintained in years. It turned into a muddy nightmare every time it rained. Suddenly, they realized that the old man with the bridge wasn't so insignificant after all. Then came the news segment. Local TV. I turned it on one evening, and there she was, Linda Perry, standing in front of her manicured subdivision, crying to the camera. We just want access to our homes. This man is holding us hostage. We're good, hard-working families. The reporter didn't bother to ask for my side. That's how these stories usually go. The poor community against a greedy landowner. But what they didn't know was that I had quietly filed a lawsuit, not for damages, but for trespass and destruction of property. And I had documentation stretching back 50 years, proving that bridge and road were on private land. The county backed me. The sheriff backed me. I even had drone footage showing their demolition crew crossing onto my property before starting work. For months, the tension simmered. Residents were furious. They yelled at me when I went into town. Someone even slashed my truck tires. I didn't retaliate, just documented everything, like the disciplined engineer I was. Then one day, I got a visit from a young man named Mark, who lived in the neighborhood. He looked embarrassed as he stood at my door. Sir, I just wanted to say, not all of us agree with what the HOA did. My dad told me you built that bridge. We used to fish there when I was a kid. It wasn't right what they did. I thanked him. That small gesture meant more than I can say. Not everyone had lost their sense of decency. When the court date finally came, Linda arrived with her entourage, all polished and confident. I showed up in a clean shirt, carrying a worn folder full of papers. The judge was a practical man, one who didn't have much patience for arrogance. After reviewing the evidence, the deeds, the photos, the historical documents, he leaned back in his chair and said, "It's clear to this court that the property in question belongs to Mr. Harrison. The HOA had no authority to remove the bridge. In fact, they committed unlawful destruction of private property. Mr. Harrison, you are within your rights to restrict access." Linda's face drained of color. The ruling ordered the HOA to pay damages for the demolition, cover all legal costs, and issue a public apology. The sum wasn't small, nearly $180,000 in total. Enough to rebuild the bridge twice over. But I didn't rebuild it. Not yet. I wanted them to understand that access was a privilege, not a right. Over time, the HOA dissolved under the weight of lawsuits and infighting. Their reputation in town was ruined. Many residents sold their homes and moved away. A year later, when things had quieted down, I met with the new, much humbler neighborhood committee. They asked, respectfully, if I consider rebuilding the bridge. This time is a shared project with proper permission and maintenance agreements. I agreed, but on one condition: it would be open to everyone, not controlled by any HOA. I wanted it to stand as a reminder of what happens when arrogance meets accountability. When the new bridge was finally finished, I stood there looking at the sun glinting off the steel beams. It wasn't just a bridge, it was a symbol of boundaries, of respect earned through humility. Mark, the young man who had visited me, walked up and said, "Looks good, Mr. Harrison." Guess it all came full circle. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's funny how people forget what connects them until they lose it." He nodded. "You ever think about selling the land?" I smiled. "Not a chance. Some things aren't about money." In the end, I didn't get revenge. I got peace, the kind that comes when you stand your ground without hatred, the kind that reminds you that decency still exists, even if you have to dig for it. People in town still talk about the bridge incident, as they call it. Some say I was too harsh. Others say I was too forgiving. But to me, it wasn't about being either. It was about doing what's right. Because sometimes doing the right thing isn't about rebuilding what was destroyed. It's about teaching others why it mattered in the first place. And every time I drive across that new bridge, I think of my father's words: a road should connect people, not divide them. Turns out, the real bridge wasn't made of steel or wood at all. It was made of understanding. And that took a lot longer to build.